Welcome to the Church Safety Guys broadcast with hosts James McCarthy, Paul Buckner, and Mike Scully. Together, they make up the Church Safety Guys. Their mission to inspire, influence, and impact church safety teams. Join us for the next hour as we talk about all things church safety and security. Don't forget to like our Facebook page, join one of our church safety and security communities online, and share this broadcast with your church.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Sunday night broadcast of the Church Safety Guys. I am James and I'm joined by my dancing co-host Paul Buckner and operations guru Mike Scully. Mike, you don't dance.
No, I don't. You're saying dancing, so.
Oh my goodness. So how are you guys doing tonight?
Good. Excited. I wasn't sure I was going to do that.
Yeah, fun times. It's actually snowing right now up in Ohio. Yeah, we're sending it down to Texas because it sounds like Mike's got more snow this year than we have.
We're stopping it at the border, Mike. Don't worry.
And those 3 inches this year was just broke the camel's back.
Y'all had to dust off your inner coats and parkas.
Golf carts.
Yeah. But if you've just joined us, welcome. Our goal is to talk about church safety and security topics, and you can always check out our resources on churchsafetyguys.com. And if you're watching this on YouTube or one of the platforms we stream to for podcasting, feel free to like and subscribe. And as always, if you'd like to, go ahead and post in the comments where you're listening from and what church you're associated with, and that always kind of helps us with demographics and whatnot, with just seeing where we reach and who's listening. So we always interact with people, and then certainly if you ever have any questions, church safety or security related, feel free to reach out to us via our website. Or Facebook, social media platforms, and we would love to try and help you with your situation. And if we can't get an answer, or if Paul doesn't have an answer because Paul knows everything, then sometimes Mike and I will jump in and,
I was going to comment on that, James, because not on the funny part, but really in the sense the sheer volume of people contacting us on a regular basis has been increasing. And so don't feel like you can't reach out because you're like, oh, they're too busy, or I don't want to bother them. Feel free, because honestly, the calls are great. I get fed through the stories, and it's even more rewarding to be able to share back and help people or coach them through something or move them in a direction that helps their team. So it's just amazing what's been happening.
Absolutely. And the other thing, too, is a lot of times what people hesitate because they think, oh, it's a big deal if I reach out to them. Honestly, it isn't. We try and respond. One of us, tries to respond back to messages as soon as we can. I've had a couple of great conversations where pastors have reached out to me and said, I'm dealing with this with my team. What are your thoughts? Can you just be a listening ear to bounce this off of, because I want to tell you what's going on. And so all of us, honestly, from doing this over a year now, all of us have a pretty good listening ear, and we've had the opportunity to help hundreds of churches across the U.S., which is it still blows my mind. It's an amazing blessing that God has put us in the place that we're in now to try and minister to others. And I know all of us take it very seriously. So even if you reach out to Paul, you're not going to get a crazy pun or a crazy corny answer.
Not as
most of the time.
Oh my goodness. So anyhow, tonight we're going to talk about a topic that we haven't talked about too much, but it's in relation to youth groups and midweek services, and just some thoughts and I guess best practices for handling services in the week. And we're going to talk a little bit about youth, and we haven't done that before, where we've brought up youth groups and how to interact appropriately with youth groups from a safety perspective. So for that, I am actually going to bring in Alan Hughes, and Alan is the safety director at Next Level Church down in Florida, and he has appeared on broadcasts all across the country as a famous individual. No, I'm teasing, but he is a great guy, and you might have seen him in our groups. He likes to help churches out, and I actually got a hold of his information as he's in our group, but also he was helping Dan Blevins with CV Ministries with some stuff, and I was like, you know what, I really want to get this guy on to talk to our folks. So welcome, sir. Thank you for putting up with Paul's nonsense and joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So why don't you, for the sake of our listeners, why don't you go ahead and just start with your story and your background, because it's pretty unique where you started and where God's brought you. So I'll let you do that.
Well, so I was born the son of poor sharecroppers, and no, seriously. So I grew up in the church. I was saved probably at about 12 years old. Mm-hmm. And then when I got out of high school, I did what a lot of people do. I ran as far from the church as I could. And I spent about the next 25 years, like I said earlier, working on my testimony. During that time, I had a career in law enforcement. And shortly after I was retiring from law enforcement, I was also coming back to the church. Where I ended up getting involved in safety was, I didn't even realize there was a church safety thing. That just wasn't even on my radar. When I started attending the church that I now work for, my intention was to maybe help out in production or something like that. And one day they announced from the stage that they were going to start having security at their Wednesday student ministry events, and they were looking for some guys to help out. So I figured, hey, I can help out. I can do something there. So that's how I actually got started in church safety as a whole, is through student ministry. And for me, it's always going to hold a little bit of a special place, because my last couple of years in law enforcement, I worked in gangs, and so every teenager that I dealt with was a carjacker, a thug, a gangster, drug dealer, and overall, I had a really, really negative outlook for the next generation. And then I started being there every Wednesday night, and gradually, I started referring to it as my midweek therapy. It was just free therapy. And every week I would go in there and see 200, 250 kids that could be anywhere else, but they were there at church. And I started watching them and watching them progress. And now, in working for the church, I am the safety director. I'm also the human resources director. I have several people on staff now that I remember starting when they started coming to our I remember the first time they were on stage performing during the worship, and now he's one of our worship directors, that kind of
awesome
thing. It's awesome. I get to see the whole circle on it.
Nice.
So what were some of the things when you made that transition? What were some of the things that the church, I guess, led the church to ask for that, like to ask for security on a Wednesday night type thing?
So at that point, their weekend security was very minimal. They had just moved into their first building. They had been meeting in a high school for several years prior to that, and they started thinking that maybe we need to have something there. We've got 250 people 300 people in our building. We should probably have somebody watching out for them. At the same time, they were starting to get a little concerned because the same drama that happens in high school will often happen at your Wednesday evening services, whatever time you're doing that. So they had a couple of guys that had exchanged some words, and they realized they simply weren't equipped at that point to do anything about it. So that's when they started adding that to the mix.
Okay, cool. I don't know, honestly. It's kind of It's always interesting to me how a lot of times during the midweek services is when you see different people or folks from other churches based on the church's ministry, and it always in my church, my situation, I think it always kind of puzzled me how a lot of times people overlook like the mid services during the week where the Sunday services always seem like to be a major focus point, which is good, but like in our church is a very large building spread out, kind of like in a giant L shape, and we always we do the Wednesday night service in one location, and that's on the far side, and then all the children's things are on the other side. So logistically with people, because of those operations more so than on a Sunday, it makes it more challenging and just makes us need more people to be able to spread out and handle the kids and handle youth and keep an eye on the adults as well and what's going on there. So I just wanted to dispel the thought. If somebody thought, oh, it's a Wednesday night, there's less people, we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, that is something that you do get that sometimes, where people are just of the opinion that it's not as important. I look at it differently. I think that we owe our next gen nothing less than what we would do for people on our weekends.
Amen.
Because they are the next generation. They are already starting to form their views of the church and their views of how they're going to lead our church 10 years, 20 years down the road. So this not only gives us an opportunity to show them that they're important to us, it gives us the opportunity to build those relationships with them and to be, even though you're not officially their mentor, maybe you do get to mentor them along the way.
It's an opportunity to reach them not only where they are, because when the world will try to chew them up and spit them out, they need to have a support system, whether that be that person like a safety team member that may just be, hey, a listening ear, or somebody else who's on staff, or whatever that might be. Those Wednesday nights can be that respite in someone's otherwise chaotic world. And to us, it just seems like, oh, it's one more thing we have to cover sometimes. But that might be literally the island for that team, for that youth, that literally look forward to that Wednesday night every single week and say, this is the 90 minutes that I get to escape from fill in the blank.
Absolutely. In fact, I say almost the same thing. You have students that are getting bullied at school. They're getting bullied at home. They've got things going on in their life that I can't even imagine, because they weren't even things that were happening when I was their age. It used to be at my age, or when I was in high school, you had people say things about you or make fun of you or bully you somehow. Now you literally can go to sleep, wake up, and there are 10,000 comments from people around the world about a picture of you. And I just can't even imagine what they go through. But that service, that church can be the 1 hour, the 90 minutes during the week where they can walk in, feel safe, remove all of that noise from their head, and be able to establish a relationship with God. And that's what we're here for.
It's funny you mentioned that, because there's a family, and obviously I'm not going to say their names, but there's a family that goes to my church that the dad is a good friend of mine, and he works in law enforcement. And he has come to the church often for different training events. Like he actively helps, like our team and that sort of thing. And so, ultimately, him, why don't you bring your family to church sometime? Why don't you come on Sunday? And he's like, oh no, I'm not into the God thing. And what was interesting is this past summer, our teens did a trip down to Tennessee because we go to a church camp down in Tennessee outside of Chattanooga. His daughter went because his daughter comes Wednesday nights. She could never get anyone to bring her Sunday, but she could get somebody to bring her on a Wednesday night to the Wednesday night services. And so she was involved in teen camp. She got saved this past year. And when she came home, she got baptized. And what was interesting was for Christmas, they asked her what do you want? Like her parents said, what do you want for Christmas? And her Christmas request was that they all start going to church as a family. She didn't ask for anything else. And since December, that family has been in church every Sunday. And so now every Sunday they're hearing the gospel. Now, I don't know. I mean, it's not for me to say what their relationship is with Christ. And I'm not saying that, they don't have a relationship or anything. I just don't know. I haven't gotten that far in talking with them. But their daughter, who is a teenager, through Wednesday night and through continually coming during the week, was the one that now has them sitting in front of someone hearing the gospel every Sunday. So, the reality of it is, I think a lot of times, I've heard it at my church where individuals, even on my safety team, have said, oh, that's, those are just the teens. I'm not worried about them. They'll do whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, that's not the right attitude to have, because guess what? In 5 or 10 years, in 5 years, they're going to be sitting in the sanctuary and we're going to be looking for people to serve. So why not establish a relationship where you can bring, and we've actually gone to the point of allowing some teens to serve with us on the safety team, because with our insurance company blessing and parents blessing and everything, because it gives them an opportunity that's different versus, and we've actually seen where teens have come up through the youth group. I have seen served from the youth group to now. They're now married. They now have a daughter. This one teen, he served with the youth group from high school, or served with the safety team through high school. Then when he got married and had a child, he's still serving, and he's actually looking at going into law enforcement because, that's just, for him, that's the next transition. So from that standpoint, I think that unfortunately the stereotypes with churches and stuff, a lot of times we just discount those ministries and whatnot. And I think that we need to be very not only from a protective standpoint and the leaders protecting the teens and the leaders who serve, but also realizing that, exactly like you said, that it is the next generation and we need to bring them up. But Paul, you wanted to jump in there?
Something that really fascinates me is, as churches, how we tend to do this. I don't know how many times I have gone to a church and their youth building is across their campus. It's a separate building. It's completely separate. And I'm like, okay, at a point when you need to have positive contact with a teen, number one, you've got them pushed off in a corner. The church I grew up in, we got moved 5 or 6 times in 1 year. And we actually were given permission to paint a room, got approval for what we were going to paint in it. And an elder came in and looked at it after the board approved it, after we painted it, and whitewashed the room in the middle of the week and annihilated what we'd put up. A lot of times these kids get kicked to the curb, and we lost a huge part of our youth group over who went to other churches or stopped going to church too. Number 3, as young men, we have to feel needed in church, and we lose a lot of young men, and the young men are the ones who are they're the ones that are going to keep the family in church. It's a statistical fact that if a man comes to Christ, the family will follow. Unfortunately, the other way around is not true. And I've taken some flack over it. James, you've taken some flack over it. But we had like young men that would say, hey, can I have a radio and help you guys? Well, they're 15, 16, 17 years old. I'd give them a modicum of responsibility. They couldn't play around with the radio, but they could flirt with their girlfriend and help me keep an eye on the grade school kids. And so they got to accomplish both missions, but they felt needed, they felt wanted, and they were genuinely helping me. And more than one time, they got on the radio and they were like, Paul, I got a kid sneaking over the tracks. And we had our property butted up against two dangers. We had a creek on one side, and on the other side, we had a set of railroad tracks. And so it was actually more than just helping them to feel needed and wanted. They genuinely were helping me.
Well, so we haven't taken that approach, but we did something that kind of relates. What we intentionally tried to do is avoid becoming like the behavior police. We didn't want to be the ones going over talking to them about, hey, I heard that language, or that's inappropriate attire, or maybe a little too much display of affection. Instead, we've involved our student leaders. So we go to the student leaders and we identify, hey, this is what we're seeing, and we give them that opportunity to lead and to learn to lead and to learn to have hard conversations, because life is going to be a whole string of those. So why not learn it now in a fairly controlled environment? And it has really worked well for us to put that on to them and give them the opportunity as a peer to lead one of their peers, rather than have us come in there as the behavior police and go, hey, pull your pants up or button your shirt up or whatever the case is.
In theory, that should be how we're operating somewhat on Sunday mornings anyway, with an usher team, in the sense that hopefully we do have, for those that do have teams of ushers that are out there, hopefully they're the person who is having that primary point of contact, and it's not escalating to that point. Or if we're being brought in, we can de-escalate further from any efforts that an usher team might have already done. So it should have that open. We shouldn't have to be the hammer or come in and be these negative people perceived as policing them or creating a response environment to their Wednesday night. If we have to, so be it. But if there's an opportunity to be taught and for them to learn, and we don't have to be involved, we can just sit back and help foster and create that safe environment, then that's where a productive and a successful Wednesday night, Tuesday night, whatever it might be, can happen.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're doing with our production people, with our worship. We're having the younger students learn those skills during the Wednesday services, so that then they eventually are doing those things on the weekends. Well, we might as well get in on that too.
Absolutely.
One of the questions that came in, I want to go back to that real quick, and then we'll take a break. But Oscar asked, I'd like to hear more details about which roles and at what ages you have seen teens being involved in safety and security. Honestly, we started. I think it was at our church, the last youth pastor. So it was 2 or 3 years ago we started. I just felt like God wanted us to be less judgmental and more involved. Like, everybody saw the security guys going around, and everybody always thinks, oh, they're really cool, really cool. And of course, being the director, my kids are like, when they have friends over, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't say anything because your dad's going to kick me out of your house, because he's the safety director and his job is, responsible for protecting the pastors and everything and all the staff and stuff. So I kind of chuckle over that, and I have three daughters and a son, and I'm okay with the boys thinking that, I'm just going to say. But what we found is we just didn't want. We wanted to have a serious perception of our team. Like, we are a serious team. I didn't want someone making fun of us, but at the same time, I just felt like we weren't spending a lot of time with the teens. And I felt like what Alan said, I felt like many of our discussions were from past pastors, teen pastors. It was like, hey, go take care of those kids because they're off doing their own thing. They have behavior issues, or can you run them home because those folks are misbehaving. So it was always go handle that. And I just felt like, you know what, instead of being on the defense, why can't we move over to the offense and actually, just like we create an environment of safety and safeness in the whole church, on the church campus, why wouldn't I want to do that and interact with folks in the teen area? So what happened was, basically at that point, I had a discussion with several of the pastors, and I said, look, if I can set up a program where they would be helpful and not be in danger and be able to serve and do something, do I have your blessing? And all of them were like, absolutely, we love the idea, go for it. And you know what? I went, and I will say this, I went through our insurance company, and I went through the attorney with our insurance company and said, what do you think about this? And I said, you know what? The only thing we ask is that you ensure that they're not in a dangerous incident or environment. And I'm like, you know what? When they're with me or when they're serving, they shadow someone, they stay right with someone, they're not wandering. They're doing a very specific task, like Paul just mentioned. A lot of times it's checking on, maybe it's directing traffic with you or learning how to do a skill like that. And I'm not going to say, 17, 18 is usually, for me, that's the age. But, I've had parents come to me and say, hey, look, I noticed you were doing this. My kid has expressed an interest in law enforcement. Can you maybe spend time with them? That's a golden opportunity. Now, I would say, obviously, set up accountability parameters so you're not always alone with that individual, but that's a good way to mentor a teen to be able to say, you know what, here's how law enforcement responds, here's how we act, as a safety team, etc. So it's not for everybody. I'm already seeing in the comments, some people wouldn't even think about it. You know what? It's not. And, you have to be dedicated and you have to have focus on that, and come up with things that they can do that isn't just like, if I was going to investigate a car or something out in the parking lot, I'm going to say, hey, you stay in the office, watch the cameras, call me if something comes up. But you know what? Kids are sharp, and kids pick up. Here's the thing: teens pick up perception and pick up attitude. So if you are ignoring them or treating them poorly through the youth ministry, they're going to pick up that they have a problem with you. But anyhow, I'll throw it back to Alan because I'm like, I'm going off too much on this. So what are your thoughts on that, Alan?
Yeah, we've only done it in a couple of cases. One in particular that we did it with was a female student that she actually had an interest. She wanted to be an EMT. She had gone out and gotten, first aid, CPR, AED, that kind of thing. And so we used her. We allowed her to help us with our medical response on Wednesday nights. And we also had the advantage of being able to kind of send her into the girls' restroom, hey, find out what's going on in there, that kind of thing. The stuff that we couldn't go do ourselves. And it worked great. Today she's an EMT. She followed that through. She has come back to us a lot of times to talk to us as mentors, even though she has moved out of the student ministry part. She still comes back and, asks us career advice, that kind of thing, because a lot of us have public safety backgrounds.
Sure.
That's great.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and take a quick break, and then when we come back, definitely Paul and Mike want to jump in there. So hang with us, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
With over 50 years of experience with religious and nonprofit organizations, Thomas Alexander Insurance and Associates understands that your congregation is different from a traditional business. We're here to fulfill your needs, coming to you while creating a personal plan for your budget and size. From your local community to around the globe, we are advocates for you. Thomas Alexander Insurance and Associates, your partner in service.
The worst has happened. Evil has invaded the sanctuary. Lives were ended, and the life of every surviving member of your church has changed forever. There will be funerals to attend. The grieving and the counseling will go on for years to come. You may even lose church members, especially if your pastor was killed during the attack. But what if I told you that all of this could have been prevented with the proper training? That your church could learn how to secure its campus and how to see the signs of an attack before it happens. At Shield Force International, we will teach you the skills you need to protect your church, to protect your children, to mitigate and even eliminate would-be threats to your church body, all before it happens. We can no longer pretend that evil doesn't exist, or that churches aren't targets. Attacks against churches and pastors are on the rise. Call or visit us online for a free consultation.
Even at church, bad things can happen. Medical emergencies, active shooters, predators, even domestic disputes. Is your church, is your ministry, is your sanctuary prepared? Do you have a safety or security team? Find out how you can be with James McGarvey's new book, The Case for Church Safety and Security. James McGarvey's experience and training, along with a biblical foundation, bring much needed information in today's trying times. It offers a true biblical perspective for starting, keeping, and growing a safety or security ministry in your church or place of worship. The Case for Church Safety and Security, a brand new book, includes a special foreword by Frank Pomeroy, the pastor at the First Baptist Church, Sutherland Springs, Texas, where they experienced the worst active shooter in U.S. history. This compelling book shares insight on preparing yourself and your church from potential threats with a biblical worldview. Start your journey to a more secure ministry and worship freely, knowing you're safe. Get more information now at churchsafetyguys.com and pick up your copy today. Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization dedicated to help inspire, influence, and impact church safety and security teams. We are about all things church safety and security, which starts with a ministry mindset and a servant's heart. We're protectors, guardians, ambassadors, and shepherds. We help church and place of worship safety and security teams all over the United States through our broadcasts, online communities, conferences, trainings, resources, and products. Help us reach more churches in impactful ways by considering becoming a monthly ministry partner. $2, $5, $20 a month will help us continue to provide these resources.
So, welcome back to the Sunday night broadcast of the Church Safety Guys. If you are listening or if you just joined us online, make sure to check out churchsafetyguys.com for more resources and click like and subscribe in the YouTube or podcast that you're listening to post any questions or comments you have in the discussion, and we'll do our best to try and get to them. So I'm going to go back to Mike real quick. So we're talking about youth and involving youth in safety and security and the midweek service. So Mike, you had something that you wanted to add to that?
Sure. I think a great way to start to introduce them, and maybe not necessarily having them serve on a continual basis, but to really start the process, to start the conversation, is to consider offering a program at your church around the medical angle, around first aid, around CPR, and including or inviting them to those classes. One of the great ways and things you can offer is called CERT, Community Emergency Response Team. It's through FEMA. It's all public available information. It's very easy to send somebody from your team to go and get the training to be an instructor for that course. It's a great way to take a 13-week course and bring some of those youth into and say, here's a great opportunity for you to learn some great skills. But beyond that, it's a great thing for our existing team members who may have onboarded at a time where you didn't have that course. That can teach them some of the basic skills they need as well to serve in a better capacity. So to me, I think that's an opportunity to bring them in, get them curious, give them some hard transferable skills that they can then not only use for a safety team, but you'll be able to understand right then and there which ones show interest, which ones have a desire perhaps to do beyond that. Not everybody's going to necessarily chase law enforcement as a career or an EMT or other things, but they may realize that they like that opportunity to serve in a safety capacity, and that may be an opportunity to open up mentorship.
Yeah, and honestly, I wanted to jump on that real quick, and then I'll throw it over to Paul. But yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we do is I do all the CPR and first aid training for our Sunday school workers and our nursery workers, and we've had people come through there, and the exact same thing. Like, they do a CPR and first aid class. It's an opportunity as an instructor to build into those individuals. To me, again, if that you like doing that, that's how I got started in all of this. Is when I was 13, I took a Red Cross first aid class because I wanted to be prepared, and I was afraid that I didn't know what would happen if something happened. Something did happen to me, and I wasn't prepared. So that pushed me. But what a great way to engage with teens and see if they like doing it. And you know what? You're building into them with the whole attitude as an adult that you trust them because you're allowing them to partake in that training and that activity. So it's good stuff. And you know what? We send kids. Here's the thing: if you don't, obviously, like I said before, it's up to you, your church, if you set up a plan or something like that. But we're sending people away, 16, 17-year-olds in the military, with parental permission, right? So why is it that we can't have them serve with someone in a capacity at church? I don't know. Paul, you wanted to jump in there?
I'm going to hit these really quick, and then you guys have got some good stuff to follow this. So I think it depends heavily on the kid. There are kids at 18 that shouldn't have a driver's license. At 13, you mentioned being 13. I was in Bible studies. I was in adult Bible studies asking deep theological questions at 13 years old and freaking out people at retirement age because, you can be a Christian for years and be a baby in Christ, or you can be a baby and be pretty mature. And I was asking some deep theological questions and had people going, and so not every kid is created equally. And then here's to me what the absence of something for the youth in your church does. I grew up in a couple of different churches until I was 15. I was in one, and from 15 to 41, I was in another. And both of those churches had a really bad habit of going, "Oh, you're a kid, you can't do anything." Now, if you were a girl, you could help with the kitchen, you could help with serving food, you could help with the nursery. There were sewing and quilting and women's groups. But that's not the demographic that's immediately leaving the church as soon as they're old enough. And then the girls follow the guy. And so what was happening was you couldn't serve communion. You couldn't help with anything in my first church unless you wore a full suit. Well, and I'm going to step on some toes, and I love you anyway. But things change culturally. And there was a time, Jesus wore a dress and sandals. He would get looked at weird in our churches today. I don't know how to put it any differently. Things change, and what's considered proper attire changes. And even in my last church, I really lobbied hard to say, hey, look, it's not important, address any hate mail to James McGarvey, but it's not important that you are wearing slacks and a polo and dress shoes. It's important that you have a heart of service. And we actually had a couple of members, God bless them, I love them. They're like, closed-toed shoes, no shorts, cannot be a t-shirt to serve communion. Women serve the love feast in the New Testament, people. And then before I get kicked off the broadcast, the third thing is, I might have an opinion on that last part there, but the security needs of teens, and this is where I'll lob it back over in Alan's direction, people act like the teens don't need a lot of loving care and supervision to protect them, even necessarily from themselves. And we focus on pedophiles coming in and trying to abduct small children. And statistically, it's very similar. Some studies I've seen indicate that teens may be targeted more. And so we need to have those checks and balances, and we need to have accountability for our team members so that we can actually protect them either from themselves or bad situations. So I'm out of ammo. Back to you.
Well, and that's a question we wanted to talk about with the time we have left, and people have already messaged that question. How do you recommend, protecting the youth group from sexual abuse? And before we started the program, we were kind of talking about trafficking and how, how that has come in, and I think it was last year. There were some churches down in Florida that noticed people coming in during Wednesday night and trying to blend in with the Wednesday night service, and they started trying to pull the kids away and isolate them and start grooming them. And law enforcement got involved. They ran checks on these people and found that these people were heavily involved in trafficking and were actually using the church as a resource to try and get people away. Sometimes that can, obviously with churches, sometimes that can be frustrating, but I know for our church, it's taken us a long time to get the point of, like, when we do youth group on Wednesday night, not everyone goes everywhere. It used to be everybody, broke up and went everywhere, and we could never track people down or find people or anything. And it finally got to the point where we had to put our foot down and say, look, you need to stay in these parameters because we can control this. But I'll go ahead and throw it over to Alan, and you can share your thoughts on that with us.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've started to focus on, both with people that are working in our childcare areas and with the mentors and student ministry areas, is educating them on what to look for. Some of those, there's a lot of overlap. Some of those are kind of different things to look for. But within the student ministry one, helping them see the signs of not just human trafficking, but of sexual abuse that may be happening at home, with a relative, someone in the community, whatever it is. And we keep just pushing the know what to look for, know who to tell when you see it, and just talking that through, trying to keep that fresh in their minds without making it sound like every trip to the 7-Eleven is going to end in a Taken sequel, but also trying to make sure that it stays in people's mind that it's not only something that happens in some country in Europe or in Central America or Asia. It happens in your county. It happens in your town, and it may happen in your church. And so we just have to be prepared for everybody to show up. Everybody's welcome. We have to be prepared for all of them to show up. And so we've really taken and we've made it a point over the past 6 months or so to really start with the mentors and start educating them on what they should be looking for, who to tell when they see it, whether it's for human trafficking or with sexual abuse, and to really just ask them to not just look for it in their group. Look for it when they're out in the community. Look for it when they're doing their job during the week.
Amen.
And they see customers coming in their business and displaying signs, things like that. So
what do you, just to jump down that rabbit hole real quick, Alan, what would you say some of the signs and descriptions of that would be?
There are a lot of resources available. Some of the ones that really just jump out that tend to be common is having people who they seem to have a very inappropriate relationship with someone that is a lot older than them. Maybe they talk to them in a way that you would see a boyfriend girlfriend, but there's a 30-year difference in there. It could be where they act like their age with you, but when this individual comes around, they start becoming more and more childlike with them, more subservient. They may not have control over their own identity documents, cell phones, anything like that. Sometimes if they have inappropriate knowledge for their age, that's another one. If they know things that you're just like, where did that come from? You are 13 years old. How do you even know how to spell that, let alone what it entails? So those are just a couple of things right off the top of my head. But there are a lot of really good resources available. And I should backtrack just a little bit. Human trafficking isn't always sex trafficking. It can be labor, and that is a big one. I'm in South Florida, so there's a migrant worker population. I remember when I was working in law enforcement, going out to some of the migrant labor camps, and you would see places that had locks on the outside of the door. With the padlock on the outside of the door, not on the inside. So it wasn't keeping them safe. It was keeping them in there.
That's crazy.
Businesses like Chinese restaurants, some of the massage parlors, things like that. So it's not just taken. Yeah.
One of the big things that we've kind of implemented to address that is that no adults are allowed in the youth area and around the youth group unless they are leaders. And we have if you are serving in that capacity, you have to have a background check. Any children's ministry. Now, obviously, background check doesn't mean that that's not happening. It means that the church has done due diligence to ensure that the right person is serving in that ministry. But the reality too is when I go on like a Wednesday night, when I walk through the teen area, if I see someone that's there that I don't recognize because I know all the leaders, my first question is, why are they there? It's just a parent. They just want to see. No. And I've had several conversations where we went through a period of time where our senior pastor was kind of filling in because we didn't have a youth pastor, and we had parents showing up, and it wasn't like a introduction, parent night, because we have parent nights too. It was this parent came, and every night they dropped their kids off and they sat there and stayed. And I pulled at one point, the senior pastor aside, and I said, honestly, I said, do you know if he has a background check? And the pastor kind of looked at me and was like, like deer in the headlights. No, I don't think so. And I said, well, then you know what? They shouldn't be sitting here. And he said, no, you're absolutely right. If they're not serving, they don't have a background check, they should be sitting in the service and listening to the service and ministering, being ministered to while we minister to their kids. And so I said, you know what? I said, would you like to talk to him or would you like me to? And he said, no, you know what? I'll talk to him. Don't worry about it. And I said, okay. So, the appropriate folks know I carried on, and and that family hasn't been in there. They regularly go sit in the sanctuary where while their kids are being ministered to. So go ahead,
Yeah,
Alan.
we went through a season where we had not just parents, but random adults that attended church kind of using the Wednesday as an extra service during the week. So they would come in and they would worship and they would sit through the message. And so we dialed that back to the point where we control everybody coming in and out. If they are serving there, they have a background check. We already know who they are. If they're not serving there, then if they have a legitimate reason to be there, they wear a sticker that says that they're not background checked, that they're a visitor, and they have to have somebody with them. And
that's exactly what we do. Yeah. I mean, honestly, and actually, the only people that, if they don't have a sticker, like if they're just visiting the church, and I don't want people to think like we're rude or anything, but if they don't have a sticker and they're visiting the church, the only person that does tours is one of the pastors. Like if I see someone new that doesn't have a sticker, they're with a pastor that's getting a tour, that's fine. The other person is myself. So, I mean, I am okay with giving someone a tour if I need to, because I've had to step in for the pastors on occasion. But yeah, we do the exact same thing. The sticker is marked, and if you don't have one, guess what? And I mean, I'm going to go to Paul because he's got an interesting story that relates. But I mean, honestly, we have had people grandparents come in and try and get to the grandkids without appropriate ID, without appropriate knowledge of the parent, and the parent being in a custody battle with them. So, just don't think it's just the parents. We had to trespass a grandmother, and actually we're following up with that today because she tried to come in and take the child out of Sunday school, just to get back at the mom. So that stuff happens, and I think we're going to see more and more of that.
Wow. Well, just very quickly, because this is a painful story, but I want to bring this up because I think it bears mentioning. So many years ago, I was running a church bus. I was like 22. I was divorced. I could not get anybody to go with me accountability wise. I went to my board. I went to our senior pastor. I'm like, look, there are teenage kids all over this bus. There's all kinds of PDA going on that I can't control. I have to keep my eyes on the road, and there are girls that are trying to have conversations with me that are unbelievable. And this was 20 years ago, and we made a big dent in the community and really helped a lot of people. But some of these kids, like you said, Alan, they know stuff they shouldn't know. And one night I was dropping off the last two kids, and it was two girls. They were friends, and they basically solicited me for sex. Come on in, and made certain things that I won't repeat here, and it terrified me. I ordered them off my bus. I'm not sure I was able to breathe from the time I dropped them off to the time I got to my pastor's house, but he was a lot more cool and chill about it than I was feeling, because I'm thinking, I'm going to prison. They're going to make a phone call and they're going to claim something. And our pastor's like, calm down, take a breath. He made a couple of phone calls and he's like, look, we can't work with this. We don't have the ministry resources. These girls need help. So fast forward, about 3 years later, the 15-year-old girl was now 18 and out of the house. And I bumped into her, and she informed me that out of all of the guys they had propositioned, other friends' dads, school teachers, school counselors, and coaches, that I was the only guy to turn them down. She didn't give me numbers, but she gave me those figures. And I was shocked and dismayed and heartbroken all in one turn. And this is why what Alan's talking about, what we're talking about tonight, is so desperately important. We should never put somebody in a situation where they would even have an opportunity to make that decision. So, Alan?
Yeah, one of the things that we say all the time is if it's suspicious for someone, it's suspicious for everyone.
Praise God.
You can't overlook the fact that, well, yeah, but they've been a volunteer here for 15 years, or they're on staff. They're not exempt. So if it makes you feel uncomfortable, if it looks like it's not right, it may not be right. And we can't just, give them that free pass because, oh, well, that's, That's John. His family's been here for 40 years, and I might just be looking at victim 273, at this point.
Yeah, and the reality, just to things that you can do. Yes, you can be involved, you can be engaged, you can help, but again, the accountability piece is huge. Make sure that you, if you interact, that you have someone interacting with you. One of the things, and I love what you mentioned earlier about Alan, about the gal that was an EMT, and you could send her into the restroom and check things out and stuff like that. There is no shortage. We've been blessed with some great godly men and women that serve in the teen ministry. So, if it was somebody that I wanted to talk to, I could very easily go to those individuals and say, hey, can you go check on that person? And they would know, something was up, and they would go check, and they would go help, versus just kind of ignoring the situation or whatever. But Mike, you had some closing thoughts?
Yeah, two last little thoughts is in the church safety and security world, of course, we all talk a lot about the DLR that doesn't look right. Well, that applies to the youth world as well. There's things that just don't look right or doesn't sound right. Alan spoke to that earlier. So I think we have to be aware of that and look at it even more so, to your point, James, is just because it's somebody we know or they've been that way or they're there doesn't mean it's right. So I think that doesn't look right comes into play. The other is, I think, in and around youth is patterns. If you want to try to avoid patterns, and that may be patterns of the same person around that teen on a continual basis, because if you don't allow that pattern to develop, you don't allow that creep to happen either, where something creeps in that shouldn't have been there. Because there are folks that, have been great pastors, who have been great spiritual leaders, excuse me, that fall victim to circumstance. They're in a pattern that then becomes easy for them to fall into that, to take that choice to sin. And if we don't allow those patterns, we can be in a much better spot.
For sure. Well, it's a great conversation. I as always, I wish that we had a little bit more time to jump down some of the rabbit holes, but we definitely, Alan, definitely appreciate you coming on tonight and hanging out with us. And I'll toss it over to Paul, and we can go ahead and close with a word of prayer.
Something that occurred to me while I was sitting here with Jesus sent out his disciples 2 by 2, that he set us the example of accountability. And I love that. It's in the word, it's accountability. So guys, I'm going to pray us out. Lord God, we come before you humbly tonight. I thank you for men and women that stand in the gap, that are willing to stand on the wall, as it were, and to keep watch, Lord God. I thank you for them. I ask that you give them eyes to see and ears to hear, that you would bless their hearts, that you would help them to see and perceive the DLR, Lord God. But we ask for a spiritual protection as well, Lord God, over our church bodies, that you put a very real and a very tangible fear in people that would attempt to come into our bodies, Lord God. Your word says that even from among our midst, savage wolves would arise. And Lord God, I ask that you would scare them off. Lord God, we'll keep a weather eye. Help us. We want to learn, and we want to keep that weather eye. We want to train. That's what we're here to do, Lord God, is to protect physically and spiritually. And I thank you for conversations like these tonight in your son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, as always, thanks for joining us tonight, guys and gals. And if you have any questions, or if we can be of any service to you, reach out to us through Facebook, social media. We are on all the major platforms, including Instagram, MeWe, Twitter. You name it, we're there. So, or you can visit us at our website at churchsafetyguys.com, and we would love to help you out if we can be of any help to you guys. So until next week, we have another special guest on, and I think, knock on wood, we won't have to reschedule. Everything looks good, but Paul is getting giddy, because it's actually a gentleman by the name of Masad Ayub.
Oh.
And so he has been doing a lot of work with churches lately, and so we reached out to him and asked him to come on and chat with us. So we're excited about that. So if you're with us next week, feel free to join us. And if you have any questions you'd like us to throw at him, you can visit our events page and see the event on Church Safety Guys on Facebook, and then you can just post a question there or email it to us, and we'll do our best to try and get that question to him and get that answered for you. So take care until next week. God bless, and thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank you for joining the Church Safety Guys broadcast. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback. Looking for ways you can help us reach more churches? Share our broadcast with your teams. Consider becoming a monthly ministry partner. Like and share our page and join the discussion in our Facebook groups. Visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com for other great resources. Remember to keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and semper disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.